chocolate. That boy good.
Eddie Murphy. Sexual chocolate.
I gotta say, being on the West, I gotta say,
the
being
best
on the
way to
West
start
Coast,
Baldy.
it takes some commitment. 11 to 2, and then 7 to 9. I mean, man.
Hardcore. I'm feeling.
That's what it takes.
You got to
That's
do what
takes
you
to be
got to
tech
do.
News around the world.
You got to
The
do.
only way out of tech news is in a box.
I'm wondering how the hell it's going to work when I go to Sweden and doing these. It'll be like 7 a.m. and 4 p.m. But you're right. West Coast is the hardest. Like if I go visit my mom in California, like that's going to be tough. Like I have to take a 6-hour sleep and wake up and do it again. Take an afternoon nap or some shit. It's going to be weird.
Whatever doesn't kill you will probably still kill you.
Yeah. But only, it's like alcohol. It kills brain cells, but only the weak ones.
East Coast's not that bad.
Boom.
Dang, I didn't know I was in the tech stand-up. Let's go.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It gets a little funny in here sometimes. So welcome to a special Tech News Around the World with Christian Bordeaux on stage. Coming in.
Hey, Christian
from-
Bordeaux, you.
Oh,
wait, we
could do it. I got you.
Sorry. I got it. We got that. And so we got West Coast in the house, and then we got somebody new on stage named Vishal Raghav. Vishal, it looks like you're a data analyst. What's your story, Vishal? Where are you calling in from?
Hey everyone, I'm Vishal from south part of India.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm just completed my graduations and I just started on some data analytics and
Nice.
I'm just currently working on a US company, like a health insurance company.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just currently working on data transmissions and data analytics, and I'm just starting with it. And Christian is helping a lot, like not helping, maybe inspiring.
Yeah, he was from my data science club, so you're getting a lot of the data science folk here. Data science and analytics.
Yeah, and here I'm to just listen from you all guys to know what the tech news going around now.
Yep.
Maybe this will be more helpful for everyone here. So expecting more.
Yep.
Yes,
Well, we're gonna get into it,
yeah.
and I'll bet you 50,000 rupees. We're gonna mention India at least once.
Yes.
You know that's not a big bet. But
Okay.
anyway.
That's like
It sounds big. I'm trying
coffee.
to be. Yeah, that's the funny part of traveling, especially Indonesia and places like that, where you got $1 million what for a can of Coke, huh? How's that work? So, welcome, Vishal, and get a little closer on your mic. You sounded a little bit quiet. I'm going to plug in my earphones just so I can hear everybody's beautiful voices, and I can now see your beautiful faces, because it's well known that Tech News Around the World, in addition to being the smartest audience in Clubhouse, we also have the most beautiful audience in Clubhouse. And if you want to join our beautiful Tech Club, you can do that by simply clicking on the title of the room, joining the Tech News Club, and you will notice your complexion will improve. Look at JT and Layla. Look, and you notice their eyes start
Look at
glowing.
Kai, handsome Kai. Look
Wow.
where he started and
Absolutely.
look where he is now. Just because he
Improve
hung
a
out
golf
with
score
us.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it improved. Look at Kai; it lowered his golf score, his handicap's down, and it's just amazing the results that people get here.
But some results vary, though.
Yeah,
Right.
your results may vary. So jumping right into it, because there's a whole heap of tech news from around the world, and that's where you all come in. If you're new to the room, you're welcome on stage, just like our new buddy up here, Vishal. Everyone, and Ed, welcome back. I think you've been here once before. And everyone else, we join here every day, twice a day, most of us, and nearly everybody in the audience joins us each day, but we always get new folks popping by, and you're most welcome. And it's real simple. How it works is we're looking for interesting news around the world, and we encourage you to hop up on stage, raise your hand, and jump up and share your news. Or if you're one of those shy Nordic types, you can tweet it from your own Twitter account. Just include our Twitter account as part of your tweet so we see your tweet. And our Twitter account is TNATW. And that, it's miraculous how this worked out. But it turns out, if you look at the title of this room, the first letters of Tech News Around the World are TNATW. And that's the Twitter account. Let that sink in for a second. It's truly... We're trying to figure out if there's some connection to the UFOs of how that worked out.
We'll have a side room on that one day.
Yeah, we're going to have a deep dive and figure out how the hell that happened.
Deep dive.
But yeah, TNATW is the Twitter account. Just include that as part of your tweet. We will see your tweet, and it makes it very easy for us to retweet it, just as Radeja just did just now. So I'm going to retweet her tweet right now, and you will see it from our Twitter account. You'll see her tweet that included our tweet that I'm retweeting. I know that sounds a little complicated. It's actually very simple. And anyway, she just sent in a tweet that Razer's super fast 14-inch video game laptop is due later this year. And no doubt the gaming geeks are looking forward to that. And then she just sent in another one that, by the way, many people are sending in, which is the fact that Google, to work with UK regulators on its big ad tracking shakeup. And I realized something yesterday, after we closed up the room, which I'll jump into now, might as well, before I jump into all the other tweets, which is, we were talking about when the room ended yesterday, because we meet twice a day. Click on the title of the room to see the schedule. So we met about 12 hours ago. And we were realizing just how fast these big tech companies are gaining power in the world, even political power. And they're now butting heads with other states like India and Russia, even America. And America just passed these 5 new bills to limit the power of these tech companies. And so is the UK now. So is the EU. And at the same time, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon are... very notably, Google and Facebook are laying down big internet cables underneath the oceans, right? Between Facebook just laid one between the West Coast and Hong Kong, and then they realized Hong Kong's now becoming part of China, so they moved that terminal down to Vietnam or the Philippines. Interesting move that was. And then there's other cables going the other direction across the Atlantic. And these new Google cables can hold way more data, 1,000 times more data than the old cables, because they're innovating on the cables and how they can utilize the bandwidth and everything. And it's not just that. And then you got the tech companies running the satellites, like Tesla's SpaceX rather, has their new internet satellite company. And so it does Amazon. And Amazon's going to have their own satellite internet. And then you've got more and more of businesses very quickly moving from selling door to door and on the streets of small towns, and they're now going to in the next year, the biggest trend in shopping is going to be everyone's going to be moving their shops onto Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and Twitter and all of these apps, because they've done partnerships with Shopify to make it super simple for you to make a little e-commerce shop on Instagram and TikTok and Twitter. And better yet, they're going to make it even easier for you to find customers, because they're just going to partner with all of the big influencers on those apps, and those influencers will get a little cut for driving their fans to your products. And so it's a win-win for everybody, and it's magical, and bada boom, now Amazon has a real competitor, because every little mom and pop shop's going to be working on all of these social media apps. And now what's interesting about that is these conflicts that we cover every day about India versus Twitter, where India is not only telling Twitter they need to remove tweets, but they're sending tough big guys in uniforms down to Twitter's office to have a little chat. And then Putin's telling it happened. We got the videotapes. It was live streamed. We tweeted it while it was live streaming. And
we want to have a chat.
We just want to have just a little chai, a little tea time.
My baseball bat wants to have a conversation with your kneecap. You know what I'm saying?
Just a little tippy tap, little chit chat. Just a little welcome to the neighborhood. It would be a shame if anything bad were to happen.
Just a hello. My mother would hate it if I didn't say hello.
And so these governments, and these tech companies, I realized what's happening. I was trying to figure out how, where there was a headline yesterday that now Japan is now doing antitrust against Google and Apple. I was like, wow, they're all doing it at the exact same time. Japan just joined the party of countries that are now going to regulate the big tech companies. What are the odds that they all are doing this? I mean, within 1 week, the US bills came out, the Japan's coming out, the UK came out all in 1 week. Simultaneously, all the big countries of the G7 are like, okay, big tech companies, we're coming for you. All in the same week. What are the odds of this? What's going on? Why not a month apart? Why not a year apart? Right? Why in the same week? I think I figured it out. It's because they all realized the big tech companies also in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, all announced, oh, we're not just done with tech. We're going into the medical systems. Amazon and Google, amongst them, announced they're going head deep into medical. And they're going to get all up in that medical data. And before you know it, your country's people, their medical system is going to be run by Amazon and Google and whoever else, these big tech companies. And their stores that they used to sell on your streets are now moving to their platforms. And your newspapers that used to sell physical printed editions are now going to be part of their platforms. And your movie studios and movie companies that used to operate within your borders are now moving to their platforms. Netflix and Apple Plus and Amazon Prime. So essentially, the businesses that used to exist as part of your geography, your sovereign borders, is moving into their platforms on their clouds. And so they are becoming a sort of cloud-based nation of sorts, and potentially with their own future currencies in some sense as well. And now I understand. And by the way, they have the pipes of the internet to your company, and the satellites, Amazon and SpaceX, now are going to be providing the actual internet to these countries. And now I can understand why these countries are scared shitless about these big companies all simultaneously, because they got together at the G7 and they're like, are you worried about what I'm worried about? Amazon, SpaceX, Google are now providing the actual internet. Are all of the mom and pop companies are now moving their businesses to these platforms in what's called social commerce, because Facebook's going to suck in every little mom and pop flower shop and cake shop and shoe shop is all going to be on Instagram and TikTok and all this. And a big part of their business is going to be there, which is going to make it very, 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 very hard for India or anybody to tell Instagram or TikTok or anybody to get out of their country, because all of the businesses are moving to those platforms. All of the media is moving to those platforms. All of the news publications are moving to those platforms. And by the way, they control the fucking pipes of the internet to your country and the satellites that provide the internet to your country. So good luck telling them to get out if they do something you don't like. They have more power than you do over your own citizens. So that's why I think we're simultaneously all in the past 4 days seeing the US, the UK, the EU, and Japan all coming up with new legislation to simmer down and prevent the future growth of these big tech companies, because they're also going to get up into your medical system. And if left unchecked, they'll get into your education system. And then good luck getting them out of your country.
Then it's like getting the blue out of blue cheese, right?
Right.
You just can't get them out.
No, it's like getting the holes out of Swiss cheese. It's like
this is like in Revenge of the Nerds. This is like in Revenge of the Nerds when they, had the pie at the carnival and figured out that the nerds were
Oh my God, if you're over the age of 40, you realize how funny Chris's joke is why they were selling so many pies with the photos inside the pies.
Hilarious.
That is a funny one. You're right. The geeks have pulled a fast one over on the jocks, aka the politicians, and they're running circles around them with all of this data. And I think it all makes sense. Comments from the Peanut Gallery. Feel free to jump in.
Totally makes sense. And, I think that they had to do it in unison. The countries had to do it in unison because then, they come out as a united front. So if I were in a governance position of a country, I'm sure they all have their policies on deck also, right? So it's not as if they had to start from scratch. And, it's probably something that they've been considering, in terms of the scaling of creep. What's that?
Hang on.
It's not me, I promise. But yeah, the scope and the creep that big tech was having into governance, and so they had to come out as a united front because they could not tackle any one of these big tech giants on their own.
So, yeah, go ahead. Welcome,
no, I
Missy.
was just gonna add that. Yeah, I was just gonna add that Orange, the telecom, with in the Middle East and Africa, they just bought majority stake in the Bardock, the Morocco health tech company. They are trying to work and expand all over sub-Saharan Africa, digitizing healthcare and stuff. So this is quite interesting. So already there is some stuff of
Yep.
all these tech companies getting into healthcare already. So,
Yeah, and I hey, Radeja, 1 second. I left out, by the way, that China is doing the exact same thing to not only the Chinese tech company giants, very notably Alibaba, Jack Ma, about to do the world's largest IPO that ever happened in human fucking history, all of a sudden got shelved and the plug got pulled because China very correctly was worried that now the Ant Financial, which is really the IPO, it's the payment system, would have totally made it very difficult for them to do their own digital currency that they've now launched since then. And Jack Ma went into hiding, and then that led TikTok's CEO and Pinduoduo's co-founders both after Jack Ma. That all happened in the past few weeks, and China's been cracking down even harder than the EU and the US and Japan and the UK have in recent months around their big tech companies to rein in the power of those companies, because left unchecked, that was potentially the biggest threat to China's government, was those big tech companies with all of the data that they have. And by the way, we read the headline yesterday and the day before that even Xi Jinping, who leads the Chinese government, even said his very first meeting he had when he became the chairman is he went to Tencent, the biggest tech company, and he was quoted as saying, "Wow, I really admire your ability to collect all of this information on all of the Chinese citizens, and this could be very useful to governments." And so maybe it's not a surprise now that they are cracking down. They are also simultaneously. So it's not just the West. It's the West and the East are all realizing at the same time that these big tech companies are sort of threats to their power. Yeah. It was Radeja, and then we'll go to Dan.
So I was actually just going to talk about Alibaba because they filed for the IPO in US today, on Monday.
Interesting.
And I just read that article as well. So it's been listed in NASDAQ for now.
Yeah.
And they have filed it, but considering that US has introduced measures that could result in Chinese companies being delisted from American stock exchanges,
right,
we don't know whether they'll actually get fully listed and they'll be allowed to go through the IPO.
Right.
But they have formally done the listing.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. So go ahead, Dan. I see your tweet.
So you were talking about being the biggest threat to their governments, but that actually is not true. The biggest threat, of course, is way 1,000 times bigger is climate change. And the article from Bloomberg and I guess others, G7 falls short on climate, even with U.S. back in Paris deal. So it talked about how the G7 could not get around to putting actual limits on coal as one of the primary things and or targets on EVs. So and doesn't bode well for the COP26 conference coming up later. So that's not good news. Some kind of cool news that Faraz sent me, probably down there in the audience. Legal & General divests from U.S. insurer AIG over climate policy. So Legal and General is a big UK investment house, and they're pulling out of U.S. insurer American International Group after deeming that they're making insufficient progress on addressing climate risks. And they're also pulling out of Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, which, by the way, I think is the biggest funder of coal in the world. And it's also the biggest bank in the world, I think, as well, a Chinese bank. Pennsylvania-based PPL Corp and China Mengniu Dairy Company. These companies either provided unsatisfactory responses to their climate questions or breached red lines around coal involvement, carbon disclosure, or deforestation. So it's kind of a part of a trend that's been going on now for not too long, by the way, last year or so, where big investment houses are starting to, it's part of the divestment movement. And so it's just going to have real, it's having impact, and it looks like it's accelerating. So this on its own, maybe not a big deal, but it's really part of a trend. I'll also just throw in one other quote that I posted from the interview I did with climate scientist Kevin Anderson. That this is like one of the biggest retweets I've ever had or views, I think, of a tweet. And this is talking about what we need to do to stay under 2 degrees, which everyone thinks is, we just have to go to net zero by 2050, which is a long way off. And this is what Kevin said. What would 2 degrees C look like? For the wealthy parts of the world, we need to be somewhere around 0 CO2 by about 2035. But that's only if you start now. So that just gives people a different perspective than what they thought we're shooting for. Probably we have to be more aggressive than we thought to stand.
What do they say we should start?
When? That means drawing a straight line between now.
What do we start?
What do we do? Well, the G7 gets together and says we're phasing out coal right away, and you set an end date for it.
Reduce consumption, basically, right?
Incentives to reduce consumption. You talked to Kevin Anderson. Yes, he said 1%. I think I quoted this the other day, but 1% of the top 1% of greenhouse gas emitters emit more than twice the bottom 50% of the global population. So in order and 10% of the top emitters produce 50% of all emissions. So yes, the problem is the people who are controlling our response to climate change are those top 10%, right? So the people who would need to cut their emissions and could easily do it, compared to the rest of the world, they're the ones in charge, and they're not really interested in doing that. So that's one of the challenges we face. So yes, cutting emissions through less use, but also switching over quickly to renewables, of course.
May I just chime in with you quickly?
Yeah, please.
So on the second one that you mentioned there, Tyler, I think it's important to. So of course, climate change on its own being a danger is one thing, but when you're able to, and this is the part that I picked up on the AIG headline, when you're able to build it into policy, which then gets built into shareholder policy vis-a-vis listings, vis-a-vis good governance, corporate governance, and then has economies linked to it vis-a-vis large giants like AIG in the very nice fashion that Dan was able to point out the connections of the major Chinese players, then not only have you presented it as a challenge to the globe, but it actually does become a challenge to deal with right now, because then even the Chinese have to pay attention to it, because the Chinese banks and the Chinese economy, which is clearly in a massive debt situation, has to start paying attention to it at some point, because now you've got kind of this domino effect that is waiting to happen, where major investors in these Chinese banks are going to start pulling out because they're clearly not in line with the governance policies required, and hence you may have a domino effect that then goes to that then plays on and on and on and on, where everyone has to kind of get in line. I hope that makes sense. And Faraz, I'm done.
Yeah, and I agree. By the way, it's all about policy. Yes, you can voluntarily reduce your carbon emissions. It's a good thing to do. It's great. It's not going to stop climate change. The only thing that will do that is having policies that put a price on carbon, that phase out fossil fuels, and by the way, these things will help the economy. They'll create millions of jobs. So it's not like, these are things you should do anyway, even climate change wasn't real. But we're not. We're starting to talk about it, by the way. I guess that's the good news. The tipping point hasn't come yet, but we're starting to talk about what we should do, and if we do it soon, that'll be a good thing. But we
I
have to
have
sort
one
of get off
article
our
for
ass.
Dan. Can
Yeah.
I ask Dan a question? Dan, do you eat beef?
No, that's actually one thing.
Oh, you
But
don't. Lucky you. Okay.
I did have an Impossible Burger the other day, and it was great.
Okay, you
It
know
tastes
what? I have
better
an
than
article for
hamburger.
you. I have an article for you from Japan, Hokkaido. So cow burps expel large amounts of methane gas,
Yeah, I saw
which
that.
is 25 times the greenhouse effect of carbon dioxide and a significant global warming contribution. However, good news is the one research team in Japan, Hokkaido, is working towards achieving decarbonization by trying to eliminate 80% of cow's gas by 2050. Oh my God.
But you're not going to eliminate the deforestation that comes from growing soybeans and corn to feed the cows. So
Yeah. But what
cows
I'm
are pretty
thinking
bad. By the way,
is,
if you want to do the easiest thing, if you feel like lowering your carbon footprint, the easiest thing you can do is stop eating beef. It's 10 times worse than chicken. And
Yes.
I can tell you, you don't miss it after a very short amount of time. You don't miss it.
Yeah.
So easiest thing you can do.
So that's the
Except buy an
reason why
EV is easier.
I started by asking you if you eat beef. If not, okay.
But I'm not vegan. Vegan would help even more. But again, voluntary action is great. Go do it. It's a good thing to do. But you really should spend your time getting elected leaders to put policy in place so everybody is doing the right thing. That's the only way to address the problem. Anyway, thanks for the time today.
So the other kind of related topics, and Nicholas, if you could jump up here, because we figured out something yesterday that I think you might be able to provide some very valuable insight on. So I keep pinging you to jump up, and if you can, I realize it's getting late in LA. If a quick shout out to our friend Nicholas, who I know everyone.
Yeah, he's rejected me as well. I feel rejected.
That's all right. He has his reasons, but today when next time he's on stage, I really want to get his take on the crypto messiah. Is Jack Dorsey going to decentralize, be a force for decentralization, and his mysterious tweets about Nigeria lately, and his comment that he's going to run Twitter on something called Blue Sky in a decentralized fashion. And that could get very interesting. And that apparently he's heading down to Costa Rica to meet with the Costa Ricans about adopting Bitcoin. And I guess there hasn't been, interestingly, any headlines today about South American, Central American, or African leaders announcing their interest to join the Bitcoin party. So that's that. Okay, well, let's see if that stays true again tomorrow, because it's a very interesting development. Kind of the momentum around the potential for a group of South American countries to start trading Bitcoin with each other if they take a page out of El Salvador's book, or if African countries group together. And then Nicholas is now telling me he can't join today, but we'll try and join tomorrow on this. So I look forward to that. So thank you for that, Nicholas. And on the Bitcoin front, somebody just sent in an article that the Bank of England chief says that cryptocurrencies are not a good medium for payments. Yeah, fair enough. And warns buyers of coins are at risk of losing all of their money, as that was indeed the Bank of England's former stance on things. They fluctuate in value substantially. Yep, Mr. Captain Obvious over here at the Bank of England stating all the interest, stating all the obvious. Well done, sir. And it's interesting, the big countries are doing what big countries do, and I think Bitcoin and crypto are a threat to their power, where in developing countries they see it as more of an opportunity. We'll just keep a close eye on that, shall we, over the next 2, 3, 4 days and see what develops there. And
one thing, Tyler, I'm trying to keep an eye on who's driving who, right? So Paul Tudor Jones, right, yesterday, in your traditional kind of headline, if you like, from CNBC, he's a hedge fund investor, quite conservative generally, right? comes out, he's really worried about inflation, and he's watching the Fed meeting coming out on Wednesday. And so he comes on, a lot of headlines on CNBC on this. I've sent a couple yesterday, but it's not about those headlines. Just the point is people like him, and he said people should put 5% in Bitcoin, which kind of the Bitcoin guys got excited about. There was a couple of rooms here yesterday about it because normally he'd say 1 or 2%. But if you think about the amount of money he has invested, 5% is quite substantive. And if you think about people like him who are conservative and worried about inflation, right, and wanting to hedge against it, and if you think about the 401k investments in the US, like, I don't know, 6 trillion or whatever, and you start to get 5% of that going into alternative crypto assets as a hedge, you start to see something there. But what I was curious about is, are these guys jumping on now because they're seeing the trends that we've been discussing, right? This momentum from the developing world. So versus, they're seeing something, new that's driving. I think they're just seeing the same things we're discussing here and feeling like there's momentum in this direction. So anyway.
Cal, isn't it interesting? He said, I don't know what to do with the rest of 80%.
Yeah, he's waiting till Wednesday to decide what to do with the rest. I doubt that completely, but that's interesting.
Very interesting.
So there's a few, here, I got a whole bunch of, speaking of that MicroStrategy, which is perhaps easily one of the biggest Bitcoin holders, Michael.
Under my old company that I used to work for.
Yep. And so Michael raises another $500 million in bonds to buy more Bitcoin, and Bitcoin price surged yesterday. I don't know that it's a real surge. If you look at the chart, it's just an uptick to 40,000 after Elon Musk hinted Tesla may again accept Bitcoin payments, which that directly ties the last two conversations, because Elon's statement, which is mysteriously left out of this headline, is that Tesla, he hinted Tesla may accept Bitcoin payments if he can get actual hard data that shows that the mining of Bitcoin is green. And I keep driving this point home that he was very bullish on Bitcoin and accepted Bitcoin for Tesla purchases until many Tesla shareholders and other friends were saying this is hypocritical because there's Bitcoin mining isn't necessarily green and your whole mission around Tesla is green, and now you're incentivizing dirty pollution of a currency and acceptance of these vehicles, and now you're a hypocrite. And so he had to pause, and that sent Bitcoin tumbling down. And he says, yeah, well, as soon as we can prove that it's green, because everyone's telling him, all the Bitcoin miners are screaming from mountaintops, but Elon, you're wrong, it's green. The mining's green, Elon. Please, Elon, you're sinking the Titanic. It's green. And he says, great, show me the data. Let's show the data as soon as we have hard fucking facts data, because that's how that dude works. When he lands fucking rockets in the middle of the ocean, it's on data, folks. The man works on data. And your dreams that things and your wishes and desires that things are green, that ain't going to land a fucking rocket in the ocean on hopes and dreams. You need actual hard physics.
It has to be data.
It has to be to get it through your fucking heads, people. It needs to be hard fucking data. Get it? That's how you land a rocket in the ocean on a platform. And that's how he works. And I say that because he was a board member in our company. And I said that the day he made the announcement that he's backing out of it. I said why? It's because there's no actual hard data, and he's going to look for the data, and he wants the data. And as soon as he has the data, he'll do a 180-degree flip back and say, we're pro-Bitcoin, baby. Here's the data. It's green. Did I not say that the day he made the announcement that he has to back out of Bitcoin? I did. Go listen to the tapes. I have the tapes. If you want the link, I'll send it to you. So he's now reminding everybody that he will happily accept Bitcoin again as soon as we got the data that the shit's green. And he's trying to put a commission together to make it all very clear.
The problem with, there's two problems. One, he's saying as long as it's half from renewables.
Correct,
so
51%.
It'll be half dirty. But the other problem is that those renewables making Bitcoin could instead be offsetting other required emissions. So it's still not perfectly green, but there is a role for Bitcoin that would make it incredibly green. And that is if it's only mined using excess renewable energy. In other words, you build more than you need, more wind and solar than you need. And sometimes, the sun is shining and you don't need that much. If then you make Bitcoin, that's a way of financing faster deployment of renewables. And that is a truly better than green kind of solution, because it actually helps fund the renewable energy for everybody else, for all other applications. So that, to me, is a really, obviously a future, but would be a great use of Bitcoin for the future. Thanks.
Yep. So
I just want to, this is Shaheen.
Hey, Shaheen,
Tyler, I want to be a contrarian here again. But first of all, to Dan's point, there's already a lot of excess energy being used for mining, things like, excess gas that's flared at the site. There are, a lot of mining has moved to Kazakhstan to kind of leverage that. That's number one. Number two, the data is there. And
right, just send it to him. If you send it to me, I'll forward it to him.
Yes. But the data's already been there, and he's in a position to have had access to it. I personally think, as much as I admire his ability to execute, I also think that he's a walking clickbait, and he's a superb marketing person for that reason. So I think he's also doing a bit of trolling here. I think that has to be considered and has to be sort of at least taken as a consideration, if not as something that's actually happening. I
think that would be a fair assumption of somebody who's never had a conversation with the guy. Yeah. So and I can assure you that's not the case. So
I'm just observing because he's always in the news.
So that's a logical assumption of somebody who's never met the person. That's a completely logical assumption.
Tyler's worked with him.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes, I understand. I've known that for a while. Yes, and again, I acknowledge that. But anyway, I'll stop.
He would love it to be green. He wants nothing more than for it to be green.
So, can you hear me, please?
But he is in a position to already have access to that. It should not be up to me to provide the data to him.
Right.
Surely you understand the kind of, the funny aspect of that. Between he and I, he could make 3 phone calls and get all the data in 15 minutes. It's not like, oh my God, the data does not exist. Can you, because I'm here twiddling my thumb until you produce the data. That doesn't seem logical.
Let's resolve it. Send me the data. You say it's easy, send it.
Okay, you're
15
telling me
minutes.
that the data
I'll
does
give you.
not exist.
I will give you. No, you say it is.
I did.
Here's how science works, my friend. The burden is on you. You're making the claim. You made a claim.
No.
You said the data exists. No. You are. You said it takes 15 minutes. I give you 15 minutes. Send it to me. Or shut up.
I sent it 2 weeks ago.
Send it to me right now in my inbox.
I sent it to you.
To be clear, are you saying that over 50% of the energy used to mine Bitcoin is renewable, is zero carbon? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying it's renewable, yes.
And to be clear, more than the data, we need the proof that data is accurate.
Very well. Yes. Okay.
Thank you. I look forward to your message in my inbox in 15 minutes.
The thing you have to remember is when we're dealing with literally billions and billions and billions of dollars and making a decision that is that weighted, of course he's going to want to fucking double, triple, and quadruple check many times over that the data is accurate. Otherwise, he's going to come out the way he did previously. And, it's not, no one's trying to be an asshole about it. It's literally just the data has to be there and it has to be proven. And that's just really what it comes down to.
It has to be hard physical facts so that he can land.
Over 50% is not green. Over 50% is not green. Shaheen, I don't know where this data is coming from, but if you have it, I would love to see it.
I will send you the various studies that I've seen, and I did send it to Tyler a couple of weeks ago when the topic came up.
Thank you, brother.
In the
Connect
meantime,
with me offline. I would love to see it too. Thank you.
I will do. Look, I'm not trying to make stuff up. I'm trying to be as scientific as anybody else.
I'm sure. Let's drop this matter.
But also, I just want to make one more. It's not like the alternative is entirely renewable. The current banking system is a giant energy hog.
That isn't an issue in this case. Don't distract yourself from the mission at hand.
Okay.
The problem, basically, it just comes down to, it doesn't matter. Fucking money isn't clean. It's not about that. It's about, he's saying that he's going to accept this particular thing, and it's not in alignment with what his company represents. And his friends are basically calling him on that, and they're not wrong, and he's not a hypocrite. So he can't possibly back it until it is in alignment with the mission statement of Tesla. And so it's not about if other things are green. It's not about if cash money is green or any fucking other thing. It's about this particular thing has to be in alignment with the mission statement of Tesla. And that's all it comes down to.
All right, very well.
But we appreciate the point is, and the debate that we are having is happening all over Clubhouse, all over the internet. Every Bitcoin person, just so those who are not Bitcoin people, which again is 99% of the people in this room, don't give a shit what we're talking about right now. But just for the 99% who don't give a shit, this is an incredibly heated conversation happening in all over Bitcoin land at the moment. Why does Elon not accept the fact that these reports that we've seen from Turkmenistan that say that the mining's green? Well, well, let's find out. I'm going to share on the Twitter account whatever evidence, the very, very best evidence we can. We will CC Elon, and we'll hopefully get him to comment and add some clarity as to why he's not convinced with the reports from, Azerbaijan, for example.
I just think it's so easy to not be convinced with any data right now.
Yeah. I think more convincing data is the issue, precisely the point. So other massive stories happening around the world at the moment is that the Supreme Court of the United States is throwing out a very interesting case happening in the U.S. at the moment. And I think Rhodesia is clapping, or a few folks are, because this is a huge, potentially important court case developing in the Supreme Court of the U.S. between Microsoft, which is the new owner of LinkedIn, and what are called scrapers, which is the data on Microsoft. And so in essence, this case is about LinkedIn's competitor, which is called HiQ, is going onto LinkedIn and scraping all of the data off of LinkedIn, off of your LinkedIn profile. All the data that you put on your profile has been scraped off, and they're making kind of a clone of LinkedIn using that data. And the question is that data scrapable? Can they scrape it? Can they use it? Is it usable data? Or is it protected property, even though it's shown publicly? For example, if you're walking around a city and someone takes a photo of you walking around in public, is that their photo, or do you somehow have rights to that photo? And it depends on which country you're in. It has different laws about this. Of course, in the U.S., if you're walking around public, guess what? Anyone can take any photo of you they damn well want. If you're on your own private property, then it becomes a separate issue. And so this is kind of the tech equivalent of this, is like you're showing publicly all this stuff on the open web. Is that data about you and where you used to work, and your photo on that public website being shown publicly, can that photo be used? And by the way, that is it gets very, very interesting indeed, this whole conversation, because the photos that are publicly available about you and everybody you've ever met are being grabbed and organized by facial recognition algorithms, which Charles Johnson, who used to join us regularly, was a co-founder of. And that tool is now being used by police forces around the world to catch all kinds of interesting people. And it's been brought to court many times. Are those photos usable? That's my photo you're using in your database to find, a murderer or something, somebody the police are searching for. And so far, the court cases have said, well, no, you put that photo up publicly. That can be used as a search engine. And by the way, Google is built fundamentally on all of the data on all of the public websites all around the public internet. And they've scraped all of the text off of every public blog, organized it, indexed it. And now when you do searches, they know which website to send you to, because precisely they scraped that data off that site so they could send you to that site. If they hadn't sent a bot to go scrape that data, they wouldn't know that site exists to send you to it, you see? So Google is fundamentally built on this principle. So if we start saying, the data on these sites is somehow private, well, bye-bye Google overnight, essentially, in some sense, right? So you understand how big of an issue this court case is now, right? What's the rule about the data on these sites? It's a very interesting development, and we'll wait for the outcome of this trial. Currently, the Supreme Court has thrown out a lower court ruling that had allowed third-party scraping of LinkedIn users' public profiles, sending the dispute back to the Federal Appeals Court. That's the latest. And whenever this issue gets settled, there will be kind of shockwaves throughout the tech world about it. It'll be very interesting to see who benefits and who loses as a result of this case in the U.S. But it's fundamental to the piping of how the internet operates, and that's why I mentioned the Google.
But Google, you can put a text in your site, then Google will not then.
No, they still
scan your site.
You can, Matt, you can dream that, Dan, but as somebody who built a search engine, I can assure you they still do. So Automatic, which is my buddy Matt who built this, Automatic is the parent company of WordPress. And I just was DMing with Matt, the founder of WordPress, which operates 24% of the internet in America. Automatic acquires a blogging app called Day One, a cute little Apple app where it's like a daily journal. And it's a popular journaling app for Apple devices with 15 million downloads on Mac and iOS App Store. And I was just congratulating him because I think this is a brilliant synergy between journaling and blogging. And certainly WordPress is the main blogging platform. And I think this is a really smart way to kind of bridge the gap between journaling and blogging and keep that behavior going. But because I just pinged him just before we started the room to see if he might join us to give us an update on the state of blogging and journaling, and the use of apps now is in some set, and even Twitter kind of plays into this as an alternative to blogging. And by the way, so does Clubhouse, because a lot of people are coming into Clubhouse are talking instead of blogging or tweeting. And I'll bet you your tweets have gone down since you started using Clubhouse. And that also speaks to the search engine scraping phenomena. And this very interesting point that Twitter was built off of their bots that scrape the internet, whether or not their metadata tags say do not follow. It's called the do not follow tag. Google doesn't give a fuck if you put a do not follow metadata tag in your site, by the way. And we have there's tons of evidence of that. And then when the fact that people are talking in Clubhouse rooms, by the way, like this one we are in right now, and that's where a lot of the new information is being put. And by the way, it is transcribable. Anyone who's ever used Otter AI or gone over to Twitter Spaces, you can see in Twitter's version of Clubhouse, they are transcribing everyone's conversation in real time, instantly, which means all of the conversations are indexable and in the future searchable as the alternative to blog text. It's now voice-generated text, by the way, just like YouTube. And now you know why Google bought YouTube, because all those YouTube videos, all the text, all the voice is transcribed into text and searchable. And by the way, 55% of Google searches, they recommend a YouTube video as part of their search results because they've transcribed every video in YouTube from speech into text. They've even forwarded to the part of the video, the YouTube video, where they are talking about your search. They made that very simple. And you can imagine rooms like this will do the same in the future. And you can imagine how valuable all of this conversational text would be to somebody like Google or any search engine or anyone thinking to build a future search engine. And you better believe Andreessen Horowitz investing at a $4 billion valuation, they have some thoughts that this might be the beginnings of a search engine. And so does Twitter. And Twitter's had aspirations of search engine abilities for a very long time indeed. And so it gets very interesting. But let's see if Matt joins us. And speaking of Google, here's the next biggest headline in the tech space at the moment. Google makes Workspace and chat available to all non-corporate users, and adds client-side encryption for data on Workspace. And why is that interesting? Well, honestly, it isn't that interesting, but it's getting an incredible amount of attention across the tech sphere, the tech publications, and the tech bloggers, because it's quite a large threat, I think, to Microsoft and the other players that have risen in the space, like Airtable and Notion, and Google was getting a little bit fat and lazy with their Google Drive and Google Docs, and now they're integrating it all together in a really nice way, and it'll be coming to your Gmail will now integrate much more seamlessly with your Google Sheets and Google Docs. Google Forms and Google Chat will all be part of what's now called Google Workspace. And you'll log into Google Workspace, which will contain your Gmail and your chats. And I guess it's a bit disruptive to all of the chat apps as well, because now it seamlessly integrates you with all of your friends who work on your docs together and your emails, and you'll see what I mean. But there's one really interesting feature that's part of Google Workspace in the paid version, because there will be a free version and then a paid version, which will eventually be $9.99 a month, $10 a month. And for the first few months, if you jump in early, they'll give it to you for $8 a month. It includes what they are calling personalized email marketing, which is an email newsletter. And why is that interesting? Because the biggest players in email marketing are like MailChimp, SendGrid, who allow you to have these big mailing lists. Substack, in some sense, is getting into that game. And big email lists were and are very big business. I know myself, because even as any conference producer will tell you that a big part of their annual revenue comes from their email list, because everyone who registers for your events signs up for your email list. And building email lists is incredibly big business, because marketers come to you and say, hey, my personal email list is 30,000 people. I get approached at least once a week, and I had a call yesterday. Everyone wants to target my email list of Scandinavian geeks on a very regular basis. And however, Google and Apple are now developing new twists that make email lists far less valuable, because you won't be able to know if your mail was opened. And then you don't know what your open rate is. And now your email list becomes much less data-based to the marketers, and becomes much less valuable as a result of that. And so coincidentally,
it literally just becomes a list.
Right. It's just a list, but you don't, it's not something you can really monetize, because you can't tell the marketer.
Literally a list.
Yeah. Well, here's what's interesting. At the same time, last week, that Apple and Google started making it, devaluing the email marketing world, Google yesterday, this headline today that everyone's sharing, is because they now have their own kind of email list functionality. They call it personal email marketing for the paid version, $10 a month. And why is that so interesting? Because Google has Gmail, and Gmail is a very large part of people's emails accounts. And so they can track the open rates, because they know what percent of your list are Gmail receivers, and they know if it was opened, and they know if it was received, and you can still get all the data if you're using their email marketing tool. So Google's, this is very disruptive to MailChimp and their competitors. And yet again, this is a case that really emphasizes something we've been talking about the last few days, which is this walled garden effect, where Google is telling Facebook and all the marketers and all the ad platforms, and Apple's doing the same. Apple and Google have the hardware, your phone and your laptops, and they're telling the Facebooks and the like, we're no longer going to share that data with you. And by the way, MailChimp, we're not sharing the data with you either. We're not going to let you know when people open your emails. And Facebook, we're not letting you track the users on their phones anymore. Everyone stand the fuck back. This is our data. These are our platforms. This is our hardware. And these are our users. And we're going to track the data, and we're going to make tools that are competitive to you. We're going to make our own email marketing tool for our Gmail users, and we'll be able to, they'll still have access to the data in that capacity. And it's the walls of the walled garden are getting higher, is the metaphor that is, the geeks internally who are familiar with this process That's how we're describing this process, is the walled gardens are becoming even more, the walls are getting higher on the walled gardens. They're locking in, they're blocking out. They're kind of siloing the effects, and it's going to entrench, make them stronger. And in part, that's why we could play the X-Files music. MailChimp saw this coming. Facebook saw this coming. A lot of people see this coming, and no doubt they run to Congress and to their members of Congress and start screaming, Uncle Google and Uncle Apple are not playing fair. They're taking the ball and running home with the ball, mommy. And so the Congress members start writing bills about anti-competitiveness. And I don't think it's a coincidence that now Apple's blocking out a lot of companies. Google's starting to block out a lot of companies. And at the same time, they do it under the guise of your privacy. We're just taking care of you. This is all for your benefit. It's all about your privacy. We're not going to share your data with nobody. We're just going to keep it for ourselves. And we're not doing it for ourselves. This isn't about enriching us, folks. This is about protecting your privacy because we love you and you're so, so special to us. And you be the semi-educated judge on this. Are they doing it for you or are they doing it for them?
They're doing it for me.
Yeah. Sure they are. Yep. Well, we'll see. Well, in part, there's some truth to that, because not only are they blocking out their competitors, one other source that they want to block out is governments, actually. And we know that because yesterday's headline in the past 24 hours was Microsoft CEO slamming the federal government for forcing Microsoft to open their email servers to reveal emails of journalists who were interviewing people about Russia's meddling in Trump's election. And this Russian collusion issue, which was, of course, a year or so ago, and this all happened many, many months ago, but it's now being revealed. Apple and Microsoft are both coming out saying, hey, we're not the bad guys. You want to know who the real bad guys are? The fucking government came to us, forcing us to reveal data about, they were subpoenaed data. They had a court order. They beat down our door and said, you got to crack open your servers and show us this data around these particular accounts. And it turns out those were no ordinary accounts. Those accounts that Trump had, Bill Barr came in, the Department of Justice came in screaming, open these boxes. We got to see what's in them. We got a court order. We got a subpoena. And it turns out that those boxes were, those accounts that they were looking for that information were journalists who were doing the investigation to figure out about the Russian collusion, and one Adam Schiff, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, magically was part of that, those subpoenas of who they wanted to get all of that information about. And Apple, with egg all over its face, had to say, yep, oops, we screwed up. We did share that information with Bill Barr at the Department of Justice. And super, super sorry, Mr. Adam Schiff, one of the most powerful politicians in American government and who was leading the government's House Intelligence Committee investigation into the meddling of Russia into Trump's election. Sorry about that, Adam. And then now, today, the update is Nancy Pelosi is saying, now we need a new hearing to get Bill Barr and Jeff Sessions, who were the general, the attorney generals in charge of the Department of Justice. They're the ones who came in guns blazing into Apple and Microsoft, telling them to crack open the boxes. And so now Nancy Pelosi saying we need a new congressional hearing to get those two gentlemen sworn under oath back here up on stage to lie to us once again, to say, well, I have no memory of any of this. 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 And you better believe that's exactly what they're going to say under oath. Otherwise, they go to jail. Because, again, watch the video of now Vice President grilling Bill Barr on stage with Cory Booker sitting immediately to her right, eyes gazed firmly on Bill Barr. And the question at the moment was, has the president at any time asked you to open an investigation into anybody? Them knowing goddamn well that they obviously did. And they obviously did ask the Department of Justice to open an investigation. And we know that now because now Apple and Microsoft have told us that they did. They said, yeah, Bill Barr came in here guns blazing. Clearly, there wasn't an investigation. And you think Bill Barr decided to do that on his own? Hell no. So it's a whole American issue. My apology to the non-Americans. But to your point, Michael, in part, Apple and Google are actually trying to cover your back, but not against Facebook. They're trying to protect your back against, potential abusers of power from the federal government who, the governments are constantly beating down Apple and Google's doors looking for data about all kinds of things. And I think they are getting tired of it. Twitter is as well. And that's in some part why I think Jack Dorsey wants to make a decentralized blockchain-driven Twitter so that he can tell all these government actors who constantly are harassing him to go screw themselves because it's on the blockchain. Nobody can do anything about it.
And I appreciate them for watching my back against the government.
Yeah, well, it's a wild tech world these days. And this does lead me to the point where we do have to be careful about who we elect because of the way that tech is now and going forward. It's just going to continue to get crazier and crazier. And as evidence of that, YouTube just made an announcement. Well, here's two interesting articles literally sitting next to each other in my feed. One is a startup called The Pill Club, an online birth control prescription and delivery service, raises $42 million. Series B, and that's great. Former Uber executive Liz Mayerdirk announced that she took over as chief executive of the Pill Club, which is an online birth control prescription and delivery service, and that's cool. And then the next article is YouTube will stop accepting ads and ad units, big ad units, including political ads, alcohol, gambling, and prescription drugs. And we just said the Pill Club is a prescription drug delivery service. Which just got a bunch of money, but YouTube is saying, you know what? No more political ads, no more alcohol, gambling, or prescription drug ads. It's too much of a headache, no pun intended. Interesting development there.
And too much of a headache.
Yeah, and then check this one out. This one fits right in as well because we're talking about all these hackers, right? And all of the headache that whole thing is going berserk. All of these ransomware hacks. And we keep finding new victims of these ransomware hacks. I'm actually kind of amazed that there wasn't a big one announced today, although there is a headline today, which is that 2 years ago, there was a ransomware hack that nobody heard about. And why didn't you hear about it? It's because the people who were hacked decided not to pay it, even though the headline says, and this is interesting, the FBI told them to pay it. Now, that's interesting because it was assumed the FBI doesn't want you to pay these things. But we now know from the Colonial Pipeline that the FBI was part of the payment because the FBI followed the payment and got the payment back. And then the meat company as well made the payment. And of course, they were working with the FBI. It's the world's largest meat company. Of course, the first thing they did was call the FBI. And in this case, this is the union Teamsters refused a ransomware demand of $2.5 million against the FBI's advice and instead said, F you guys, and rebuilt their entire system from scratch rather than pay the $2.5 million ransom. And probably so. It might not have cost $2.5 million to rebuild their system these days. So if you have a smart developer on your team, you could do that for probably a lot less than $2.5 million. So when the Teamsters were hit by the ransomware attack over Labor Day weekend in 2019, the hackers asked for a 7-figure payment, and the Teamsters, as they are perhaps known to do, said, go F yourself, and we don't play that way. And
go fuck yourself.
Yeah, so they rebuilt their own damn system, y'all. Another interesting headline, and then we'll turn it over to the folks on stage. The Stripe yesterday, about 12 hours ago, this kind of broke when we were meeting in the previous time zone. Click on the title of the room to see our previous meeting. Stripe announces what they call Stripe Identity, a self-serve tool for companies that can be used to verify identities using AI, launching in 30 countries. And this is very interesting indeed. And Stripe is the biggest fintech company in the world at the moment. Second is Klarna in Stockholm. Stripe is 2 founders originally from Ireland who went through the YC Y Combinator accelerator. And so Stripe does Stripe for identity verification, which is an incredibly useful thing and was a very difficult thing that they had to build for themselves. And now that they build it for themselves, they're productizing it and making it available to all Stripe users. And that's the true genius of Stripe, is they continue to make new products for themselves. And like Amazon did with their own cloud infrastructure, Amazon built its own cloud and said, hey, you know what? Why don't we make this available to everybody? And that's called AWS, Amazon Web Services. And now that's a multi-billion-dollar business itself. And in a similar way, Stripe built their own identity system, which they very much needed. And now they're going to make it productize it for everybody else. It's truly genius. And it's very interesting because it's a very technically tricky thing that they've done, just like Stripe's core business. And this is just going to Stripe, I'm predicting now, will become one of the next big, truly mammoth tech companies. It's with Amazon, Facebook, Google. Stripe will be the next big tech company that reaches that level. That's not even a bold prediction on my part anymore. It's very evident.
And Shopify is an investor in Stripe, right?
So thank you, Cal, for stealing the next headline. Way to go,
Sorry.
Cal.
Sorry about that.
You're exactly right. It was revealed in the past few hours that none other than Shopify have acquired $350 million of Stripe's pre-IPO shares, which couldn't make me happier as a Shopify investor, because Stripe is incredibly valuable indeed. And the fact that Shopify has been investing heavily in Stripe means that Shopify is more valuable than people imagined. And that's why Shopify stock shot up 6% or so yesterday, and will continue to do so for the foreseeable future. And because of this now announced holding of Stripe, which is, again, the next big, massive tech company globally. And let's pull in Joseph Michael, who's a dear friend who leads the Nordics for Stripe. Let's see if he'll join us here. Ping. There we go. Joseph Michael. And if you're in the audience, Joseph, raise your hand, as he sometimes does. He's in Stockholm. Here he is. Let's see if he'll join us. And of course, he won't be able to say too much about Stripe, but let's see what he is able to say. And anyway, but indeed, Shopify is also on incredibly good footing, and will also, yeah, you're right, Cal, potentially could join the pantheon of, these ridiculously huge companies like Amazon, because they are essentially doing what Pinduoduo did in China in some loose sense, in addressing Amazon only addresses one part of retail, which is kind of the big, they were competing with the Main Street retailers, essentially. And there's all of the mom and pop shops, which Amazon is not really addressing. And Shopify is. And Shopify is partnering very intelligently, I would even say geniusly, with all of the social media platforms to onboard all of the mom and pops. And if they do manage to do that, they likely will become in that pantheon of the top 5 tech companies globally. Yeah, and it's interesting to watch. They're definitely making good progress with that, because there was announcements even in the past few days that, of course, the Instagram, Facebook partnership they announced, the Google partnership they announced, and now the Netflix partnership they just announced, and now the shareholding in Stripe they just announced. It's like, holy shit, like how many good announcements can you have in 2 weeks? Jesus Christ. So kudos to Shopify, kudos to Stripe, continuing to innovate in really interesting ways. But this Stripe identity has really interesting implications that would take a deep dive room to really discuss properly. Because identity on the web is going to become a huge, huge issue. Because, let me just play this out for you. This is why it's so important. It's not obvious. What Stripe does is, if you are building a website, you have to figure out how to allow people on your website to receive payments, like Clubhouse just did, by the way. Now you can receive money from other Clubhouse users. That takes a lot of time to write the code to do that properly. It's actually very easy to write the code to do it badly, and everyone used to do that. And everyone was, writing bad code around how to accept credit cards. I did it myself on my own blogs. And there's all kinds of problems that come up with that, especially security problems. And then Stripe came along, made it as simple as embedding a little tiny bit of code into your website, and bada boom, now you're done perfectly, flawlessly. Stripe has mastered it, and you can embed it in 30 minutes and you're done. And they'll do it. They did it way better than you ever could, and they continue to improve it all the time, and it's magical. And you can understand how incredibly, endlessly valuable that is for people building websites that want to do anything with accepting payments. Okay, great. But we're not done. Now they've essentially done the same for proving the identities of people. And you can imagine how Clubhouse would love to know the identities of everybody. And Facebook and Twitter. And by the way, Twitter has this incredibly huge headache that they actually don't know the identities of the users of Twitter. They know me because I'm verified. I'm part of the elite blue checkmark club on Twitter, and so is the Tech News Twitter account. No, it's not. Just me personally. But that's because I'm friends with the founders. But if you're, good luck getting verified on Twitter. It's very difficult. So Stripe is adding this verification of users could become a plug-in solution for the likes of Twitter and Clubhouse and every other website on the internet to know precisely who their users are. And now you understand how incredibly valuable that is, especially if new regulations come along, and I bet they will, as they already have in Korea, that you as a social media site now need to know who the people are using your site, because we need to have oversight into what our citizens are doing and saying. And any Korean on the stage or anyone who's ever spent any time in Korea can jump in and verify. You need to sign up with their version of the social security number in Korea, because the Koreans understood years ago the important. Michelle knows because she works at Facebook. So Facebook requires Koreans to sign in with their social security numbers. So, or Mengi Huang probably knows. So it's...
Yeah, Tyler, this is Michelle. I just wanted to ask a question.
Yeah.
I'm actually wondering if it's not more in the KYC, know your customer context, they're going to roll it out, because I'm just thinking probably those platforms you mentioned are able to build their own verification system through Scan, anytime soon, given the resources they have. But I'm just wondering if Stripe isn't rolling it out in the KYC context, because not all companies will be able to build that. And most of the time, those will be third-party plugins that just do ID verification. And I think it makes it more lean for whoever want to integrate Stripe and a verification system, so they don't need to have two providers separately. That's kind of what I'm thinking. This could be a good use case, just kind of one use case in one plug,
Yeah, I'm
like
thinking
2 use cases in one plug. Sorry.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I'm thinking of, if the regulation comes down that even you as a tiny, tiny site need to, mom and pops don't have the means to do verification in the way that the big companies can. And this Stripe thing could get huge, just like Stripe itself is huge, because Stripe solved the similar problem around, accepting payments and handling credit cards and stuff for small sites. They made it super simple, painless, easy, and an absolute no-brainer, and that's why they blew up on that. But they continue to add similar functionalities that they solve very, very difficult problems, and then make it super, super, super simple for everyone to adopt it. And if that regulation comes down, holy cow, will Stripe become a massive juggernaut very quickly. So it'll be, not that they will anyways, honestly, but that would really expedite it. So, and then actual respect and applause to Shaheen, who is DMing data around the greenness of renewable energy usage in Bitcoin mining. And I sincerely applaud and respect Shaheen for fighting the good fight and wanting to do the right thing in this regard. And so as much heat as I give him on stage, it's partly for show, by the way, because that I want you to understand how heated this discussion is in the Bitcoin community.
And Shaheen is one of the top contributors to this to show, right? Because he comes in,
I'm reading
he takes
it
a
as
point
we
of
talk.
view, and he does that. So credit, respect.
Completely. Yeah. And it will be people like Shaheen who drives the ball forward. And so forgive my semi
Oh, not at all. I can take it and I like it and I think it's great.
Fair enough.
No worries at all. No worries at all.
No, I'm
not quite Irish, but I'm pretty close.
Okay. I'm more speaking to there's a lot of people in the audience who are unaccustomed to this. You join us regularly enough to know that, it's part of
No, but you take it back as well, Tyler.
Yes, indeed.
You take it back as well. If you were to give
and you
back,
do as well.
You'd receive too.
Yeah,
you'd give back too. That's what we do on this stage.
Yeah. Well, by the way, we've kind of calmed down, and we don't do it in the European time zone that we're in so much now. But it used to get wild and fast and furious over in the other time zone with the Americans. We've dialed it down a bit in recent weeks, but those who join us have been with us for many weeks. Know
you were just doing a teaser for the Late Show.
That was a warm up, by the way. So the other headlines that I have, one really interesting one that Radeja shared, or it might have been Poppy. My apologies if I'm not correctly giving the correct attribution. Scientists think they can use your body to wirelessly charge your electronics. And I got to tweet this out just so that everyone can see this, because this would be a real game changer. And we saw early indications that I've seen other headlines about this, and boy, would this be, there's two potential technologies happening simultaneously. One is kind of remote inductive charging. Inductive is when, you charge your phone on the back of it's kind of, they call it wireless. It's not wireless. It's, you put something on the back of your phone as like a magnet and it charges, what they call inductive charging. And then they can do that kind of at a distance as well. This kind of, there's been many demonstrations of, powering light bulbs without cables, over 3 meters and whatnot. And you could certainly charge devices in a similar way, but your body also works as a conducer of electricity, and small devices like watches. There's people trying to innovate on how to charge, your wearable watch through your skin. And so the article that I just sent out from Boy Genius Report says wireless charging is a smartphone feature we've come to take for granted and expect from every high-end handset, but wireless charging tech is only in its infancy, and what we currently refer to as wireless charging is very limited. And wireless charging is a little more than a convenience that allows us to continually top up smartphone battery while we're not doing it. And they show how all of they talk about how the big handset manufacturers are all trying to tackle this, because this would be a real next generation breakthrough if we could solve the cable issue, because so much of what we do is cables and dongles and accessories. And how amazing would that be if we could move to
some of the answers actually in the phone. Like on the Apple Watch. I'm sorry, I said phone, but in the watch, it's an example. It's that Tapmatic engine. It's the buzzer or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If they just rigged it to move in the opposite, you could actually charge the phone with your vibration as you move. It's just those devices aren't tuned at the vibrations we have while we're moving. So at some point, your watch is gonna, just like manual watches, right? Those things charge off of your motion.
Yep.
So we're going to get there with this stuff sooner than later.
Yep. And that's what the article says, is the smartwatch will be certainly the first one. But even just the walking movements that you do could physically, theoretically be translated into energy. If the phone in your front pocket, if you're walking around all day, in some sense could be used to channel be converted into electrical charge. So it's very interesting. And so thank you for that.
Just quickly, Tyler,
yes.
It's a really, really good start.
Yeah.
But if you dive into it, they are talking about sort of the power levels are around the 2 microwatts.
Yeah.
Whereas when you start talking about the chargers that come with your iPhone, you're looking at about sort of 5 full watts, and then if you can actually plug it into your MacBook charger, you get 10 or 12 watts. So it's orders of magnitude smaller.
They're even doing 20-watt chargers on smartphones now.
Exactly.
The Xiaomi is now claiming they have a smartphone that'll charge fully, like a 4,000 milliamps, in 8 minutes. And so you have both innovations happening simultaneously, which is phones that charge in 8 minutes, full charge. By the way, the iPhone is about 3,500 milliamp hours, and the Xiaomi saying they have a 4,000 milliamp hour and charge a full charge bigger than the iPhone in 8 minutes with a 20 watt charger, cabled, or can charge in less than 30 minutes through the kind of quote unquote wireless inductive charging. But so, both innovations are going to happen concurrently, and hopefully someday we'll get to the figure out the alien. Maybe the UFOs are here to show us how to charge our devices. One can hope. So I'll pause there because there's still a whole lot more headlines. Biden and Putin are meeting in Geneva on tomorrow, and no doubt all of the hacking insinuations will come up because the G7 just collectively yesterday said that countries, very notably Russia, they even named Russia, by the way, but they did say countries everywhere, but especially you, Russia, need to start taking more account of all of this hacking that's going on. And no doubt that will be fresh in Putin's mind as he meets Joe Biden in Geneva tomorrow. So it'll be very interesting to the cameras will be no doubt, and the videographers who have permission to be there as part of the press corps will be looking and analyzing every wink and smile between Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin. The handshake and shoe lifting, and it's truly a phenomenal art form. The meeting of world leaders, adversarial world leaders, and the amount of analysis that goes into their body postures and the amount
here
of
we see Putin just slightly taking the upper hand, and he's coming in with a handshake just a little bit above. Yes, that's right. You see here, a little bit like tennis, Tutter, right?
Yes, a little.
The other thought is like, these headlines. Do you not find it funny when you read them? And it's like they're kind of like didactic, like i.e. very teachery. Pupils must attend school, like the school rules. Like they sometimes come out with like, Russia must take more responsibility. Like, what does the word must mean? It's like so conditional, right? I just kind of, I don't know. Maybe it's a bit like, it's one of my idiosyncratic kind of thought processes. But when I read it, I go, well, what is the event, or what's the validation, or what's the mechanism by which must turns into will? I don't know. That's my thought.
But in any way, Tyler, we're used to in Geneva here to have, of course, peace talks and different parties, even when they have wars to meet. But on a security level, the US and Russian sides meeting in the city here right now is 10 times above what you're used to in terms of blocking the center of the city, security going crazy all over, no school tomorrow, everybody has to stay home. This is like really at a level I've never seen something like that, which is understood,
Did you guys know that over the G7 discussion, when they were discussing about how to deal with China, allegedly cell phone signal was actually cut off in Xinghai's region, just so that there will be no listening in. So security, as you want, but to cut off mobile phone signal, that's a totally different level.
Yeah.
Don't tell me I'm not gonna connecting here to our community tomorrow morning because of them. Then I'll go mad.
It could happen, and I'll share a personal story. We had the president of Israel speak at our event, and Cal, that might have been the one that you attended in 2010. The photo that you have here in Clubhouse is from was that with Shimon Peres at that event?
He was there, I think.
Yeah, it was that year. Yeah, I think, which was 2010.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the amount, and this was downtown San Francisco, and
that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, and at 8th and Howard, if I remember correctly, the San Francisco Design Center concourse, next door to where Zynga's headquarters are now, and when you have a state leader, especially an Israeli state leader, who is a very high target for a lot of people, a lot of extremists.
Yossi Verdi, right? Sorry,
Yossi brought him in, right?
Yes.
And I just wanted to share, because we never really discussed how much security detail went into having, an Israeli president at a tech conference. And it's equal to, and we know this because they told us, the U.S. Department of Defense comes in, as does the Israeli Mossad, and they are there on the premises for an entire month, nonstop, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for an entire month leading up to the event to secure the venue. That's step one out of 100 steps. And I'll just give you my favorites, where they had in the hour leading up to the event, they shut off all traffic within a blast zone radius of 3 city blocks of downtown San Francisco. No one was allowed in or out of 3 city blocks for the hour leading before the event, and everyone had to go through it was the same. The White House representatives that came told us that it was the same level of security detail that the president of the U.S. receives, that the Israeli president received. So it's an incredible level of security that you as a tech event have to go through to cater to the speakers of that type, which is a tremendous logistics headache. But I have to say it was worth it. It was a very inspiring conversation. Yeah, but it's, my God, I can imagine what Geneva's going through with the U.S. and Russia meeting together. Holy cow. And I think it's also not a coincidence that it happens in Switzerland, not because of their history and reputation for being neutral, but because they have an also incredible defense ability that is often not understood by most people outside of Switzerland. But Florian knows exactly what I'm talking about. Truly remarkable.
Yeah, and also it is a little bit of an interesting twist also, given that in Geneva, of course, many of the UN agencies are headquartered in the global headquarters of the UN, also here in the Palais de Justice and Palais des Nations. This is one part, but then if you look at previous administration in the US, which were not funding at all the UN, it was a big problem, and you had China winging in and taking certain places and putting certain people. And now to have Russia and US having a meeting here around the ecosystem of UN is kind of an interesting twist also to see.
Yep. So there's a bunch of headlines breaking, including Florian. You just sent one in about the EV headline. You want to do that one?
Yes, I have to pull this up. Or can you read that through? Because I'm on my phone right now.
I got it right here. So from Motor Trend, the EV tech that will improve range, cost, and environmental impact is going to take even better electric cars to grow the market. That's where these advances come in. And they talk about battery tech and the solid state batteries using ceramics that will hopefully be a game changer, and how the advancements in fuel cells, in the electric motors, and it's sort of a deep dive article kind of covering how eventually they'll add the recycling element, which, by the way, Northvolt does in Sweden for the German car companies, and etc. All the latest innovations that are happening in the EV space that will hopefully bring EVs to gain even more market share than they already have. So thank you for that one, Florian. And then Faraz just sent in one that other people sent in yesterday about China debuting blockchain-based digital currency salary payments. China reportedly implementing the country's first blockchain-powered digital yuan transactions. China is progressing with its central bank digital currency, debuting blockchain-enabled salary payments in digital yuan, according to the official website. In the Zhongyang New area, the People's Bank of China has successfully completed the nation's first on-chain wage payouts in digital yuan. And so that's they're as usual. They are doing things at China speed and making everyone else look very slow in adopting their own central bank digital currency. So thank you for that one, Faraz. And then Amazon's former CEO, who recently resigned, Jeff Bezos, is in a headline here where it says, tech giants call on the SEC to require climate impact reports from companies. The group of tech giants, including Amazon, Facebook, and Google, have urged the SEC, Securities Exchange Commission, to push companies to issue climate change performance reports. Intel, eBay, Salesforce, Autodesk also signed the joint letter to the SEC chair named Gary Gensler. Following an SEC request for public input on such disclosures, the companies called on the agency to make business report their greenhouse gas emissions, harnessing existing frameworks and recognizing global standards for required metrics such as the World Resource Institute. They called on the SEC to allow for climate-related disclosures outside of annual, quarterly, and other filings. We believe the climate disclosures are critical to ensure that companies follow through on stated climate commitments and to track collective progress towards addressing global warming and building a prosperous, resilient, zero-carbon economy, said the companies wrote in a letter, which journalists have verified. The 7 companies noted that they've purchased 21 gigawatts of clean energy altogether. Last month, Google revealed plans to run completely on carbon-free energy by 2030. Microsoft pledged to become carbon negative by 2030. And also Amazon, alongside the likes of Uber and Verizon, IBM and Visa. So it's applause to those folks. It seems at face value that they are very well-meaning and trying to drive everyone towards a greener future. Let's hope it is what it seems, because often with things like this, there's much more than meets the eye. But I applaud them at face value anyways. Any feedback on that one? Or any articles to share from the stage? Feel free.
Tyler,
yes,
I just want to give some feedback.
Sure.
I think this is an interesting play because most of like Amazon's getting into stores and locations, so I'm in the same space for 5G and everything, but if you're already in the digital world, what you're going to do is force the old world or the physical world, more companies that sell cars or non-electric cars or whatever they're doing, or shipping and manufacturing and plants. The tech world can really take this on its spear and be fine. But the rest of these companies won't survive. And so it's intriguing that most of these are tech companies doing this because they'll just mitigate, let's say like industrialized countries. And most of this will be targeted on the U.S. But look at the emerging economies and the emerging countries. Like China went through that. There's parts of Africa and there's other countries that are trying to bring their economies up through sort of an industrialization, but they won't be able to adopt the carbon, decentralized footprint as fast because they don't have the tech infrastructure. That's all I'm saying. So it's an interesting twist on the other side of that coin.
Hey, Tyler, you there?
Sorry, I was muted. Jesus Christ. I was saying Cheryl just shared.
To yourself.
Cheryl just shared an interesting one. You want to share this one, Cheryl? That's a tongue twister.
Go ahead.
Okay. Clearview AI controversy highlights rise of high-tech surveillance. Facial recognition software developed by tech company Clearview AI has sparked a global backlash. And at the DW Global Media Forum, DW is one of my favorite publications out of Germany, and the DW Global Media Forum is one of their big gatherings. The company's CEO of Clearview AI defended their technology of this facial recognition search engine, which is being widely used by police around the world, even though their governments are telling them not to use it. It's far too useful of a tool.
Isn't that Charles's company?
It is Charles's company. And so regulators have zeroed in on this firm, and now regulators are trying to make it essentially illegal for their police forces to use it, because the police aren't going to stop using it until you penalize them for using it, because it's catching bad people. It's an incredibly useful tool. And that's why we get into these really interesting debates with Charles about this. And people who are included in the database, and by the way, everyone's in their database, say, well, I didn't give you permission to be in that database. And their argument in court is, yes, you did, by putting your photo publicly on the internet. And so that's the issue that we were raising about earlier, about the scraping of LinkedIn And you can understand how important this issue is. So this article goes on to say, you don't want your face to appear in the database of Clearview AI, ? The company CEO doesn't seem to care. All the information we collect is collected legally, and it is all publicly available information, he said during DW's Global Media Forum, addressing criticism that the firm's controversial technology infringes on the privacy of hundreds of millions. Privacy advocates recently lodged data protection complaints against Clearview AI in 5 European countries. They argue that the software, a search engine for faces, combing through billions of photos, violates the UK's and the EU's strict privacy rules. The controversy highlights how an artificial intelligence technology matures, it could give rise to surveillance on an unprecedented scale. And indeed it does. And here's another quote. We have seen facial recognition being used in Russia to detain peaceful protesters. Yep, that's true. We have seen facial recognition being used on children in Argentina, which was, that's some sort of the arguments against it. And he added that facial recognition technology is often inaccurate and prone to discriminate against minorities. And even if it is accurate, there is also immense potential for human rights abuses. Yeah, every technology can be used, even non-technologies, even hammers can be used in very bad ways, indeed. That's an interesting argument. My hammer can hit people. It can do bad things. We should ban hammers. So it's the old hammer argument. But
it is a bit like that, Tyler, isn't it? And I feel it's a little unbalanced. It can catch bad guys, catch rapists. I think we need to.
No, this is why debates need to happen, and people need to bring their very best arguments. And these arguments often can get emotional and heated. And in cases like this, maybe rightfully so, it gets very personal around people's data and their ID, and people can, I actually really like the point he raises about how Russia used facial recognition for the Navalny protesters, and technology when used by governments can also be good or bad, and it's being used, like I said, by police forces around the world for lots of good. And I imagine it would be really interesting if they were able to come out of the shadows and publicly say, we're arresting scores of people that we were never able to before. But of course, if your government is bad, and he highlights the Russian example of how they're arresting protesters who in the Navalny protests, it would be concerning to see how this technology could be used, against, and it was being used against Hong Kong protesters. And that's why they were wearing masks. But in Hong Kong, China has their own version of Clearview called SenseTime. And that is part of Clearview's argument, which is, there's a Chinese company doing this with the Chinese government called SenseTime. It's wildly popular. It's an incredibly huge company. And you can see the finances behind SenseTime. And the Israelis have their own. And Russia's no doubt building their own. And then shouldn't America have one as well? And that's where the conversation takes an interesting turn. So if we're going to ban Clearview, then other parties, your opponents, have it and you don't, and then you're at a potential real disadvantage. It's a wild conversation. So I'm sharing this article.
It'd be interesting for them to just delineate between those that the countries they wanted to give it to, and those that they didn't, based on merit, and then that tracks back to the kind of power argument of, AI for good versus for bad, which would flip the dynamic between the country being able to do what they want versus the technology getting the upper hand. I don't know. I'd have thought.
Well, we can extend this whole conversation to AI, of course, because this is just one little branch of AI. Is the facial recognition, uses machine learning to do the facial recognition, and that's just one out of 1,000 use cases of AI. We could talk about the other 900 use cases of how AI could and should, and how that plays into governments, and simultaneously the genetic engineering part. Because the genetic engineering community in the U.S., kind of led by George Church at Harvard University, in private conversations, he will express just how concerned he is that America is not being a leader and making the progress, and that in fact China is the leader in genetic engineering progress and innovation, and that there's consequences to not maintaining the leadership position on these technologies that are hard for people outside of those spheres to even comprehend, and are very concerning indeed. So it's a wild conversation. And it again goes back to the fact that the technologies are growing exponentially while we are growing biologically and politically at a snail's pace, and they are growing and they are heading to Mars while we descend into chaos and on Twitter debates. So
great candidate for one of our get the gloves on, ready to rumble debates.
Yeah,
we'll have fun with that, right?
Yep. Well,
and how many patents do we file comparatively to the Chinese? And then, I'm sitting in Canada and I get asked constantly whether it was okay for part of the university to sell very relevant patents to or early stage companies out of our country or the US to China.
Mm-hmm.
And but coming back to AI for good, that is that opportunity. And who's storing all this data and what are they going to do with it?
Yeah.
And then, we've got to laugh because we don't even have, as I say, as a simple, humble being, we are just a seed in this journey, and we don't know what it's going to affect on the planet as it grows.
Mm-hmm. So check this out. So Nalormi, you just shared an amazing article. You want to do this? Is she on stage?
No, she's in the audience.
Okay, so this is wow, she just found the key puzzle piece for today. It's from Bloomberg. The title is Why China Cracking Down on Education Tech Firms. And if you follow us closely every day, you have an idea why. And you also know why America will in 6 months from now. Because China is just ahead of the curve as a government. They understand how important the data is that these education tech firms are collecting, and why they understand the need to how that is potentially a threat to them as a government. And if you were with us, what the first headline we jumped into today was all about this. But let's circle back on this, because now we've got a Bloomberg article that lays it bare right here. China's private education companies have for years been the darlings of investors in New York and Shanghai, building a $100 billion industry on the promise of the world's largest and arguably most competitive schooling system. Then suddenly they got caught up in the Chinese government's sweeping efforts to rein in the country's technology giants. Yep, here it is. The regulatory clampdown, ostensibly in the name of consumer protection. Remember, I said they're doing it on your behalf. Whoever wrote this article, who is this? Who wrote this? This person knows what's up.
They're sitting in the audience.
No, not Nalorm, not the person who shared it. I mean the actual.
No, the article.
That's what I mean. The author is sitting somewhere.
Are you serious?
Down in the audience. I'm joking.
Oh,
but it sounds like
it's verbatim. The point I've been making that we've been discussing. It's literally verbatim. I got to read this again because this is so perfectly in line with. I mean, it felt like somebody hacked into my emails and made an article out of this. So yeah. Pay attention. This journalist knows exactly what's going on. And China's, and I'm telling you right now, I'm making a super obvious prediction. China's doing it today. America and Europe will be doing it a year from now because China understands what's going on before the rest of the world does. China's private education companies have for years been the darlings of investors in New York and Shanghai, building a $100 billion industry on the promise of the world's largest schooling system. Then suddenly they got caught up in the Chinese government's sweeping efforts to rein in the technology giants. Yes, China did start cracking down on their big technology companies before. They did it a few months ago, and America and Europe and the UK and Japan are all doing it this week, literally this week. And we've been sharing those headlines in real time this week. China's 2-3 months ahead on that. They started cracking down on Alibaba, Tencent, all of them about 2 months ago. And the ed tech companies were part of that. That's what we're going to get into. And the question is, why are they focusing on ed tech? And America is not yet cracking down on ed tech, but I assure you they will, which this article is going to explain, no doubt. And by the way, the name of this crackdown is we're doing it on your behalf as the consumers, and even Apple and Google's crackdowns on how Facebook is using your data is being said that it's being done on your behalf. And we're here to tell you that's all bullshit. They're doing it for their own reasons. Now, let's get back to the article. The government, ostensibly, these crackdowns are being done in the name of consumer protection, has also walloped listed companies and forced startups with big name backers like Tencent to mothball plans for multi-billion-dollar IPOs. Yep, that's what happened. The industry's rise and potential fall hinges on two of the most powerful and anxiety-inducing forces in China today: the pursuit of wealth and status, and the Communist Party's enduring obsession with maintaining social order. How did tutoring become so popular? And now they get into the actual companies, the ed tech companies called Gaokao, the National College Admission Test administered in June. And then they get into what did regulators actually say? What is the bigger picture? Officials are also concerned about the destabilizing effects of hundreds of millions of parents plowing their life savings into online classes while subjecting children to increasingly onerous workloads and all of the data that goes along around that. What have regulators actually done? Announcing a plethora of restrictions, including caps on fees firms can charge and time limits after school programs. Regulators have fined two of the biggest startups for false advertising. Alibaba backed and Tencent invested in companies, which, by the way, all the tech companies are backed by Alibaba and Tencent, by the way, which went into effect June 1. So this report, as usual, is kind of behind the curve. But it's a super interesting point here that, as I hinted, as the room opened 2 hours ago, that the big tech companies that are being cracked down on in the West, and Japan, which is kind of caught between the East and the West, is they're now cracking down on the big tech companies because they understand they are, as this article said, I forget the word that they said, a threat to their power, essentially, maintaining social order, they called it, and their status. And as the big tech companies branch from media, like buying the movie studios, like as Amazon bought MGM last week, they're going to go into both health and then eventually ed tech, and they already are, by the way. The big tech giants are going to go into med tech and health tech, and when they do, and they get all that data and all that control, and it's too much for the governments to handle, and they're like, no, we can't let that happen, because they understand that they don't stand a chance as a government in fighting the big tech companies once they get fully their data octopus arms all around the education system and the medical system. Because then there's no cracking down on them. They would be too powerful. They would be like, nah, we're just going to turn off the internet and we're going to move everyone down to Mexico and create our own tech. Hey, Mexico, how much are you for sale for? Actually, double it. We'll take it tomorrow. Do you take cash? And then any governments are going to be really up shit's creek if they don't start cracking down on big tech today. It's wild how this is all unfolding on a day-by-day basis. And what a great share, this Bloomberg article about why China is cracking down on edtech. I assure you, I can promise you will see headlines in the next 6 months, because that's how far behind the U.S. is on this, and the whole West, even the EU, around the importance of cracking down on tech in health and med tech, education tech. Yes, Cheryl.
Kai is doing ed tech in China. You don't want him to comment on this? Kai is in the audience. I mean, on stage now.
Yeah, feel free, Kai.
Kai.
Yes, Kai is working from home.
You're the expert.
I'm on the golf course. I'm listening to all this, and several comments I want to make. Number one, the collection and the utilization of data by the big tech companies in China actually was all learned from what Google and Facebook does. I think it was a lot of fantastic entrepreneurs. They were actually educated in US, and I think the technique has long been known, and so I think China is not the inventor of this mechanism. But of course, in China, the benefit is that number one, there are a lot of data available. Number two, parents are obsessed of sending their kids to study. And trust me that you have a lot more opportunity to send your kid to a tuition center than going to hospital. So therefore, the education data and then how much time you spend on screen studying, the amount of data is actually much more abundant. So I think I'm glad the Chinese government actually now realize this. What is interesting, the second point I want to make is that there's a number of tech company was built purely branded artificial intelligence assisted education companies. Personally, I don't like it, but the famous example is a tech company in China called Squirrel AI. So Squirrel AI, the claim is that we will be able to know that what kind of things you like and what kind of question you struggle, and we will also know the type of questions that are being in the exam, the university entrance exam, as well as the junior to senior high school exam. So we can design the curriculum so that you can to optimize your performance. Of course, once you can link that with your other house data, then we can fine tune it. But of course, you know that this is a trap. Once you go down that route, you have to give more data to Squirrel AI. So education is one of something I would call the portal of data and utilization of data. And another magic thing about education is that hopefully we will not stop learning. So from K to 12 education to further education to on-job training to lifelong learning, education will stay you all the way. So I think Chinese government is damn right that it's time to have a watch, to have a control, to actually say to the big tech company that you cannot totally do whatever you want. And I think there's a third element, and a lot of audience on this stage might not like this point that I want to make, is that edtech companies are in essence private companies, and private companies have the right to actually accept international investment. And international investment, guess where most of it will come from? It will come from US, it will come from Japan, and these are not countries who are overly friendly with China. So therefore, when you have lots of data about Chinese citizens being gradually controlled by American investors who is deeply connected with regimes that will make false a claim against Chinese government, and then possibly involved in inciting incident in Hong Kong. Ladies and gentlemen, you know why Chinese government would want to say, no, I want to crack down on this. I want to get in control on this. So I hope these three angles can help us to
Can I build on
actually
that a
understand.
little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly.
Yes.
I just want to applaud Kai. That's a brilliant insight. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's excellent.
Yeah.
So I served as head of our Confucius Institute at one of the universities where I was an administrator. And, it was really interesting. So to build on the political piece that Kai left off on is that universities are really sensitive about the types of partnerships that exists between American and Chinese institutions. So the Confucius Institute is a Chinese government initiative to kind of bridge culture and language and education and research between China and over 150 countries around the world. And so it has become increasingly political to the point that I had to really lobby to maintain our relationship with the CI, because my colleagues and others within the university system saw it as a way for the Chinese government to start to influence how education was playing out within our state. So that's the first piece. And then Tyler, I think I'm going to push back a little bit in terms of how I suspect that the American higher educational systems will react. So I served as a regent of a university system for 6 years. I've been a dean and vice provost at a couple of universities. And what I've seen is that state governments, so the legislatures are looking for higher efficiencies within higher education. So if ed tech companies can come in and provide a greater return for a lower cost, because the states cannot continue to fund education in the way that it has, over the past 10, 20, 30, 40 years. We've seen how state appropriation has decreased over time. And so tuition has increased. So families also cannot continue to pay higher and higher tuitions. So I suspect that the level of pushback is going to be not as great in the US as it is in China, as long as the IP, if you will, in terms of who actually owns the content. And I'm looking closely at what's happening with Coursera, with Google. Certainly that does not fall within the jurisdiction of, state-funded higher educational outcomes, but states are really looking to have as many people in their state who are, generating incomes to support state taxes. And so if Coursera can partner with Google or anyone else to provide that level of outcomes, I feel that a lot of legislators are going to be supportive of those types of platforms.
I don't doubt it. You've got the experience, and that's why we're happy you're here.
Lakeisha speaks seriously well. Like just listening to how she frames stuff.
Me too.
I mean, it's awesome.
Yep.
Can I bring it back to China just for a moment,
sure,
Tyler?
Yeah.
We actually touched on this a little bit in the previous EdTech room, which was a couple of weeks ago. Now.
When is the next EdTech room, by the way?
That is today.
Is it?
It is. Yes, yeah, it's this afternoon.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So let me plug this real quick, because we finish here right now at the top of the hour. We meet again in 6 hours. We meet for 2-ish hours, and then Carl and other MedTech Smarty Pants folks join for the MedTech Deep Dive room, which will be a lot of fun. You're not going to want to miss that. And you can see that by clicking on the title of this room and scrolling through the upcoming events. You'll see this room, and then when we meet 6 hours from now, and then you'll see the EdTech news.
Yeah, so we have the MedTech this afternoon, following on from the afternoon session, and then the EdTech without the M after that.
Oh, that's right. Cool.
Yeah, so a couple of weeks ago, we covered this a little bit, and in fact, Kai was there, and he was so wonderfully gracious and kind with his responses to our questions. I haven't actually had an opportunity to thank you yet, Kai. I was very appreciative of that.
It's a pleasure.
But we touched on it ever so slightly. But what's got me interested is this is a different take on it, because this kind of started at the beginning of the year, where EdTech companies in China were starting to get worried, and in fact, there's quite a thing with British education faculties, establishments having branches in China, and they had started pulling out as well at the turn of the year and just before the year. But that's because the narrative at that point, or at least what we found and what we discussed, was China introducing legislation to sort of restrict the kind of content. So it wasn't so much on the advertising; it was more on this talk about forcing content creation, educational sort of content creation, educational establishments to have a license, and potentially even have the content has to be regulated and would have to be under a sort of a certain format that was dictated by sort of the authorities in China. So this doesn't mention that specifically, and I'm wondering if anybody has any information in it. Has that changed? Is that still the talk? Because that's kind of what was the narrative at the beginning of the year. But there's no mention of that in this article. This is more focused around the...
No doubt. This is not unique to any one country. The countries are quite understandably concerned about the actual content that their young children are digesting.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Research. It's the research angle as well. So IP, as it relates to high-tech research, is really sensitive. And so, it gets into geopolitical issues, actually.
Yeah. But that's why that room is so interesting that you'll be doing. I'm so glad you're doing it, Carl, and I'm glad you were there, Kai. Hopefully Antti as well will join again today. Who runs Finland's leading EdTech incubator. And if you don't know, and you should know, Finland is widely regarded as having the best education system at the moment. And but just also a comment on this article about EdTech in China and why the investors are understandably so eager to participate, because God bless, Chinese parents who are, value education, and just incredible strive to get their kids the best education possible. And I applaud Chinese parents around the world for for their Israeli parents as well. All of my Chinese and Israeli friends all had parents that deeply understood the value of education. And along with that comes investors who want to invest in those countries because they know that those parents are highly motivated to get their kids the best education they possibly can. So it's an interesting topic, and look forward to that room later with Carl and hopefully Kai and Auntie and others. And hopefully,
can I just quickly plug that? Just quickly, just wanted to say, sort of EdTech is sometimes sort of put on the back foot because it's not quite as sexy. The word I like to use is sexy. It's not quite as sexy as the things that affect us because as adults, because our education so much is in the past, and unless you have kids, it's not so much at the forefront. But it is the most important topic. Maybe well, even more so than the environment, because the education system provides people the capacity to think about the environment and climate change and everything else. So it is the most important. So anybody here in the audience, come along, come and join us, bring your stories, bring your opinions. Let's make it sexy.
Carl, one of the things I was going to ask is, are there any EdTech firms focused on retraining or retooling of the current workforce? Because changes are coming, and office workers need to learn different skills. Are there adult-based platforms, so to speak?
There are loads. I can't name any off the top of my head. I remember when we went through last week, there are quite a few that are actually pivoting. So a lot of companies at the moment have entered sort of the higher education space. There was one that we covered, and I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but a lot of them are pivoting over into the workforce as well. Yep. This is happening a lot in India. India is like both India and China, but India is super exciting at the moment for EdTech because Carl, there's one every 20 minutes.
You'll remember the buddy of mine from Stockholm who jumped in the room, Joel Hellerman, who does that Sana AI Labs, where it was an EdTech AI company that claims to be able to people learn with 3 times faster and double the retention and whatever, and that they essentially have pivoted into doing that upskilling or reskilling for the corporate because it's so lucrative actually and easier to sell to corporates than it is to the education systems, which are notoriously difficult to sell to. But that itself is part of education. And then I'm also wondering, Chris?
I'll stop preaching, but it's like, for example, I'm a mechanical engineer. I went to school, graduated in 2003. SolidWorks used to cost like $5,000-$6,000, and now you can get Fusion. It's almost $1 a day, and go out and learn a skill and get paid $50, $60, $70 an hour and have essentially endless work. And so if you're out there in the crowd, go find these skill sets and retrain because change is coming. I'll get off my soapbox.
No, but so I think Nilomi and Carl are 2 of the smartest people on this platform, right? And they're running this EdTech room. I strongly recommend that if you can find the time to kind of listen to it, contribute to it. And it doesn't, Carl doesn't have to call it sexy. It's like the biggest investment opportunity if people get in early and understand the changes too. To Chris's point and to everyone's point, Nilomi, do you want to say a couple of things here? Because I know you're passionate about this thing, but also one of the smartest people I know here.
Please.
So, yeah.
Well, Chris, thank you for, sorry, my voice is still not full. Chris, you just gave me topic for my upcoming room. And in the meantime, I was reaching out to Todd Meckles, who everyone knows in the room, and also Auntie Tyler.
Yep.
So this is a topic I'm working on, and it would be next 2 weeks in the future room. And I just followed you on Twitter, Chris. So I will personally make sure that I remember to message you once I set up the room.
Cal, hey, it's MA. Hey, Carl and Nilomi. Chris, I really wanted to address what you said because I was waiting to jump in, but there's something, Carl, you mentioned higher education. I think the biggest challenge that we are going to receive is what Chris just said, because there's a much more dynamic difference when educating adult learners that have already been in the workforce for a period of time and still have to get used to the tools. There's a different learning curve that has to happen there. So it's a bit like there's a multitude of psychological things that happen when you have someone that's in their 20s trying to educate someone in their 50s. And I know this because I've experienced it personally doing education and change management, as Cal would know, for SAP and for clients like Best Buy or clients like Interpublic of the company. And I see this a lot when it comes to the fact that I've worked with SAP and Microsoft and Oracle, how uncomfortable the members and the clients that come in to learn something, how uncomfortable they are when the person delivering the training is not resonating with them. And that's something that's super delicate, because I think this is what Chris was probably alluding to. And Chris, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm seeing it as a baseline upskill, which means you've got a lot of silver economy people that need to stay in their jobs longer, and they have to learn how to do this work on computers. But
it's the thing is they are doing it in their private lives. It's like you talk to these people and they have hobbies
Absolutely.
that they're intensely,
Exactly.
reskilling,
right,
but they just aren't making it fun.
Yeah, and I think that that's the part of it, Chris. Like, I mean, I'm 50 years young, but no one would ever guess it, because my vitality, it's not about sexy. I agree with Cal 3,000,000%. It's not about sexy. It's about these people like myself have a passion for learning new things. We have a different mindset. We have an open growth mindset. And absolutely, Chris, there's tons of people at home that are like this. And quite frankly, they're bored sitting at home just doing it. They want to be useful. I think the key here is I have yet to see a platform that caters to them. That's what I'm interested in seeing, a platform that caters to them. Because what I see is a platform that's trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, which means everyone's so enamored by millennials and the younger generation and AI that they're forgetting, I don't work fast. I like to work methodically. So the people study at home, Chris, because they don't want to be harassed to speed up. They don't want to be dealing with the competition that's in a lot of these training spaces and a lot of these programs. They don't want to deal with being rushed. And that's the big nuance that I would like to see. Like, for example, I'm training myself on Python, an engine game development, and I'm doing Pragma, Solidity development. I don't want anyone to rush me with how long I'm going to take to do it. I just want to do it at my own pace, and I'm passionate about it. But that's why I don't sign up for these programs. That's why I don't go and pay a lot of money for these schools, because I want to do it at my own pace. And that is something that, especially in certain cultures, they're not going to tell you that they want to do it at their own pace. They're just going to lean back and not attend the courses. And I've experienced this myself teaching in various different countries. So we need to sort of roll back the ego a little bit. With all due respect from a yoga perspective, roll back the ego a little bit, that we think we know what works for them. Chris, you're 3,000,000% correct that they're home getting their computer on. But we can't assume that we know how they're going to educate themselves on the tech space or be upskilled if we don't connect with them and become relatable to them. And the challenge with that is everyone's going at a speed of light. You're going to lose half those people. They're not even going to want to be bothered with it. And I see this in the most unique place. I see this in my yoga classes. I see this in how other people teach yoga versus myself. And I get a lot of older clients, and the one feedback I get is that I'm patient with them. I let them take their time. I teach them more stuff. I educate them. I keep on asking them questions, touching points with where they are in the process. They love that experience. But I have yet to find a program, a computer, a training center that can do that.
This is why the concept... Go ahead.
Okay, Harvard University online course for CS50 computer science.
Never
it's
heard
free
of
of
it.
charge. Online is free
Never
of
heard
charge.
of it. Harvard what?
University.
Harvard what?
Tyler's University. I'm going to see. Yeah,
you mean YouTube University? Because I know all about that.
YouTube University is pretty badass. It's pretty badass.
Hold on. I've got a special place in my heart for CS50, so I want Cheryl to have space for this.
Yep. Yeah. Enjoy at your own pace at home. No more excuse. Just do it.
Just turn it into a video game, and I'll be there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So CS50, boring little sort of anecdote. That's how I started. That's what changed my career from catering into tech. And it's literally it's wonderful. It's completely free. It's really well curated, and it takes you from knowing absolutely nothing to giving you a really good springboard into programming and understanding tech. So,
I've done it too.
It's so good. It's really, really good. It's a good place to start.
So we'll be there later for that. Do join us here in 6 hours and then hang out for the after party rooms, the deep dive rooms on MedTech and EdTech, and get informed. And
Tyler?
It's a beautiful thing. Yes.
PTR for one thing, because there's your friend.
Okay.
And I just wanted to leave you with one question, one observation for
Tony?
something that well, that's Tony Hawk.
You got a photo with him in Miami?
Yeah.
Did you mention?
PTR,
did you meet his wife?
No, his wife. I don't think his wife was around the conference. But very quickly, 2 points that I want you to go down the rabbit hole on your own. Jack Dorsey is an
That's
investor.
dangerous.
Jack Dorsey is an investor in Something Labs. God, the name's not coming to me right now. And not only that, but he also has funded Square, another Twitter that says Square app or something like that, Square Wallet. Just look at it because it's crazy. He's inside those tweets. Just look at it, Tyler.
Okay.
I tweeted you I tagged you in it as well, and I think you'd find it very interesting.
Alrighty. Well, thank you to everybody. We're now 11 minutes over, but we'll see you all in about 3 hours. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday, wherever you are.